We are live. Alexander, you there?
Absolutely. Here I am.
All right. Great. Alexander, let me just jump onto YouTube studios here and make sure we're okay. Make sure the stream's all right. How are things going in London? Just give me a second while I do what I need to do. How are you in London?
I'm very well in London. It's been actually good weather here, unusually. And of course, it's exciting times. And can I just explain to everybody that the reason we're doing this early today is because I'm going to have a packed day today. And the reason I'm having a packed day today is because of a man in Belmarsh, Mr. Assange. There's been a decision by the High Court to go forward with the appeal that the United States is bringing against the decision to refuse extradition to send him to the United States. I have some information about the nature of the grounds of appeal that the United States has been allowed to bring. They are, in my opinion, extremely threadbare, so threadbare that in some ways I'm surprised that this argument continues to be made. But, you know, it is the United States, so I always expected that there would be a hearing. It's likely the hearing will be in November, but lots of things to speak about, lots of things to discuss there. Many people I need to talk to. Quite possibly one of them will be Stella Morris, who is the fiancée of Assange. I'm not absolutely certain that's going to be the case, but it's going to be important people like that. And it'll be an opportunity for me to familiarize myself with the case and to give my own opinions. I stress opinions. I'm not part of any legal team. I'm not part of any campaign team as such, but I am somebody who is in contact with all the people who are involved.
Do you see anything coming out of this?
Yes, my own view about it is, can I just explain what this is, the appeal is? As far as I can tell, the US government have been told that they can't challenge the quality of Assange's witnesses. They tried to. They said that one witness in particular should not have been heard, but the High Court has said that's nonsense. You know, it was fully entitled to call whatever witness he wanted, and the Judge Baritza in the Westminster Magistrates Court was entitled to hear him. And they're not entitled to argue that Assange's physical health, his health isn't as bad as they say. But they are going to try to argue that they should have been given more notice about the fact that the question of Assange's prison conditions in the United States might have been brought up in the actual trial last year. And they're also saying that they're prepared, if he is sent to the United States and he is convicted there, to send him off to Australia so that he serves his prison sentence in Australia instead of the United States. Now, this is, when I say it's threadbare, I mean, I really mean it. I mean, this is ludicrous. I mean, they had every opportunity to argue and prepare for any argument about prison conditions. I mean, to say that they didn't is just ridiculous. That to argue that they didn't have notice is equally ridiculous. The reality is, if they weren't prepared, they could have asked for a postponement of that part of the hearing, and they would have got it, and they didn't. And the point about Australia, well, they could have made it to the judge at the hearing last year, and of course they didn't. So, I mean, this is all material, all things they brought up now, and to be frank, it looks desperate. I mean, I think the reason they've done it is in order to get a step in with the High Court, and the reason the High Court is listening to them is because it is, frankly, the US government. I think anybody else bringing these sort of arguments would have been thrown out. So it doesn't look like a very strong appeal, to put it mildly, but the High Court clearly feels it needs to consider it, and I suspect it has taken that decision more for political reasons than for legal ones.
So the court is politicized.
Absolutely. No, I mean, this has been a political case right the way through. Now, to say that doesn't mean necessarily that Assange is going to lose in November. I mean, I want to make that very clear, because, I mean, though no one else would be allowed to bring these kind of arguments to the High Court, I mean, to my mind, they are so weak that I wonder whether the High Court is going to be able to agree with them, because they look on the face of it, I mean, weak to the point of absurd. But having said that, you can't rely on anything in this case or depend on anything in this case. And that's the reality of it. I mean, it's not impossible that they will find some reason to send him to the US. And we can't assume that because these arguments are poor and bad and weak, that Assange will win the appeal arguments in November. But, you know, we'll see, and we must keep our fingers crossed. And also, his lawyers will have to prepare hard. I would add that he's going to be in prison all the way to November. So that is astonishing in itself.
All right. Okay. So Alexander's going to have the inside track on everything that's going to be going on with Assange. Next week, we will do a few videos, and we'll have some special guests as well. And we'll discuss what's going on with Assange and what's going on with other things in the news. So next week, we'll have some really, really good content. Of course, Alexander will debrief everybody as to what he knows about the Assange case. So it'll be an interesting week next week. Guys, welcome to this early morning live stream, and hit that like, everybody. Duran shop, pick up a hat, pick up a shirt, t-shirt. Are you wearing a t-shirt today, Alexander?
Well, I'm a long sleeved. I mean,
it's still
in the summer. It's still. I know. Well, what's that? That's London for you. I mean, the thing about England is we don't really have seasons. People should understand. It gets a bit warmer sometimes in the summer. It gets a bit, and it gets a bit colder sometimes in the winter. But the usual condition of the weather here is a sort of indeterminate blur, especially in London, if I have to say. But it can be beautiful. But you know, England can be beautiful at times, and one shouldn't be put off coming here, because the British are very adapted to their weather, and they can make it a very pleasant place, even when the weather is foul, as it often is.
Yeah, well, we'll see about where we can travel and where we can go, Alexander, because the way things are looking right now, travel may be a distant memory. Maybe our kids will be talking about a time when their parents used to be able to actually jump on a plane and go places. That may be a thing of storybooks, the way things are going right now. What else do I want to say? Australia. That's what I want to say. Australia, Alexander. Sydney lockdown. What is going on there?
Well, I mean, perhaps people from Australia can explain to us, but it seems to me that Australia, more than any other Western country, has bought into the Chinese system, which is basically you lock down when you have a single case. And the thing about doing that, of course, is that China is huge. It's 1.4 billion people. Australia is not. I mean, its territory is large, but the population is small. If you try and mimic the Chinese system in Australia, well, one, you have a completely different culture and political system. I mean, people there prize their liberty, prize their personal freedom. And secondly, you're going to wreck your economy, because, as I said, if you close down a Chinese city, well, the rest of China can go buzzing along perfectly well. If you close down Sydney, well, I mean, the effect on Australia's economy is huge. So, I mean, it seems to me a very strange approach to take, just for those very practical reasons. It's one that no other country in the West is following at the moment. It's an extreme policy, in my opinion, and I think it's a reckless one. And I wonder how much longer Australians, who are, you know, in my experience, individualistic, freedom-loving people, more so, say, than the British themselves, how much longer they're going to put up with it. But at the moment, it seems to be wired in to the way the political system works. I can imagine lots of Australians being very angry.
Yeah, a few more topics I want to get to, Alexander, before we go to some questions. South Africa, Zuma, we did a video on this. What are your thoughts on what's going on there?
Well, I'm divided there between hope and concern. Hope in the sense that it does seem, this is obviously, I'm talking from a distance, as if the legal system is functioning to some extent, in that very unusually, in this part of the world, a political leader is being held to account through the legal system. That is if you accept that this is a genuine case and not a fabricated one. I mean, I'm not absolutely sure about that, by the way, but I think on balance, this is a genuine case. So on the one hand, it does look as if this is a real step by the judiciary to hold a former president to account. And that does speak of a respect for law and for the structures of law in South Africa, which is a good sign for the country. But then against that, you have to be very concerned that, this thing has been allowed to get as bad as it has, with the allegations of corruption by this president, which were, ongoing whilst he was president. And there's also, one gets a very, very uncomfortable and bad feeling that the problems that are identified on this particular president not only have not been solved, that they may actually be getting even worse, and that South Africa's problems may be mounting, and that the political system there is unable to cope with them, and that general society in South Africa and the economy, obviously, are all suffering as a result. So I'm divided between hope and fear where South Africa is concerned. Hope that this may show a path forward, fear that the problems are so great and so embedded and, if you like, institutionalized that, this is just a spasm, if you like, of a legal system that still functions after a fashion, but that the overall direction is backward. We will see, and I hope people from South Africa come onto our program and are able to speak about it.
All right, Afghanistan. Alexander, what is going on in Afghanistan?
Well, I mean, this is the giant story of the moment because, of course, I mean, it's clear that the government and the military structures that the United States spent 20 years creating, 20 years and trillions of dollars creating, are collapsing like a house of cards. And you will note that the man in the White House now tells us that the pullout will be completed on the 31st of August, not the 11th of September. I think the original plan was pull out on the 11th of September and proclaim victory, say mission accomplished. And, this is the anniversary of what happened. And now we managed to turn it round. Osama is dead and we've achieved our mission. Well, I mean, with the collapse that's ongoing in Afghanistan, that was an unsustainable position. So now they're going forward and they're saying 31st of August. And I think they had lots of plans about what to do in Afghanistan, keeping mercenaries there, keeping special forces there, building up militias there. It's all unraveling at lightning speed. And I think the chances are we're going to see a Taliban government, or perhaps even a Taliban-led government in Afghanistan, perhaps by the autumn, which is pretty astonishing. And in the meantime, and I've just done a program about this on my own channel, we see all the neighboring countries, Pakistan, India, Iran, Russia, the Central Asian states, they're all scrambling to come up with some kind of consensus about how to handle the situation when the Taliban does take over. And that inevitably means, by the way, that they're in private talking to the Taliban. And I suspect not so private also. And of course, behind all of these countries, there's China, which has its own ideas about Afghanistan too, wants to build roads, railway links, pipelines and all that. And I've no doubt they're also talking to the Taliban. But all of them, the Russians, the Central Asians, the Iranians, even the Pakistanis, and certainly the Chinese, will want from the Taliban assurances that the Taliban is not going to try to export its jihadist ideology. And bear in mind, the Taliban is a terrorist, recognized as a terrorist organization in Russia, for example. So the question is whether the Taliban is prepared to do that, and whether its assurances are worth anything. So lots of diplomacy going on the sides, and the United States cut out, and this is increasingly looking like a debacle.
What a debacle. GEC's Ariel, thank you for moderating. Alexander, it's like a rapid fire segment. Before we get to the questions from the live stream and super chats, we'll answer all your guys' questions. The next topic I want to discuss with you, because, man, things are just breaking out all over the world. Haiti, we did a video on this. We have some news. A bunch of Colombians and 2 Americans is the latest of who they've captured in the embassy of Taiwan.
Well, that's so very interesting. I mean, you know, it does beg so many questions. Now, we did a program about this just yesterday, and my own feeling is that this is probably an inter-regime battle, and I also thought that it was probably to do with organized crime, and it was some kind of a hit, and that it might have been, and it might conceivably have been related to the international drugs trade. Well, I'm sorry to say this, and I hope this isn't going to sound awful when I talk about Colombia, which is a remarkable country with many things going on. But when one does hear about Colombian assassins, one does tend to think very much about international drugs trade. And this president in Haiti was apparently deeply corrupt, led a government many people thought in Haiti was deeply corrupt. It was the target of popular protests. It was clinging on to power beyond the president's term. He was trying to claim that his term expired in 2022, even though his term, according to the court in Haiti, expired in 2021. But he was clinging on beyond that. And we discussed in this program and said that it's beggars belief that an assassination team would be able to infiltrate the presidential compound there and carry out an assassination without some degree of internal official collusion. And here we now learn that, in fact, these assassins were seeking refuge in the embassy of a country that Haiti has relations with. Note, by the way, that Haiti is one of the few countries that still recognizes Taiwan as China, the Republic of China, in place of the People's Republic of China. And that is a reflection of the enormous power the United States has in Haiti. And by the way, when I talk about the enormous power of the United States, one has to relate it back to the Clintons, who basically created the political structure that still holds power in Haiti as a result of a series of interventions they engineered in the country back in the 1990s. So I'm afraid all the roads lead back to Bill and Hillary.
Where else? Where else will they lead to? Alexander, the United States. The final rapid fire news question for you is, what's your thoughts on Trump's lawsuit against big tech? He's filing a lawsuit against them. And he's basically, the lawsuit is trying to connect the fact that big tech was working with government institutions, hence the private companies working with the government means that they violated the First Amendment. Well, many legal experts say it's going to fail, by the way.
Yeah, many legal experts say it's going to fail, and possibly it will, because of the very politicized nature of the court system. But it shouldn't fail, in my opinion. And I'll tell you why, because I think it's true. I think you can consistently see big tech tracking government decisions. So the government announces it has a particular opinion or view on something, and big tech follows it. Now, I have to be very careful what I say, because obviously we are on a certain platform, talking on a certain platform at the moment. But all I will say is that the fact that there is the big tech tends to track what the government is doing does suggest to me an institutional connection. I'm not going to speculate beyond that. Now, this case may succeed if it gets past the first obstacles. Now, there's going to be attempts by the defendants, the tech companies, to have it thrown out at an early stage as showing no basic course of action. However, if it survives that, we will be in the process of what lawyers call discovery. In other words, Trump and his lawyers will be in a position to ask for documents to be provided, for information to be provided by the big tech companies. And that information could relate to their contacts with various entities, people, politicians, officials, who knows? And that's when the case becomes interesting, because it is always in the documents, the emails, the messages, that cases like this tend to get won. But he has to get through this very difficult initial stage of battling it through a court. He's got to persuade a court that there is enough of a case here to to move on to that stage of discovery. And with the way the legal system is structured at the moment, that looks extremely difficult. But if he does that, then don't underestimate the possibilities here. We are going to be talking to Robert Barnes next week. People should be aware of this and look up. This is something I would very much want to discuss with him, because, of course, he has a closer feel for the American legal system and the direction the judges are taking than I do. But I would have thought that if we can get through that initial obstacle, this case could become extremely interesting and could develop in important and perhaps powerful ways.
Yeah, Trump has already won, if you want my opinion on this big tech thing, because I think he, by taking it to court, he's going to use it come 2024. I mean, one of his policy planks is going to be I'm the defender of the First Amendment and free speech. And here's the court case to prove it. Once again, he's going to be the little guy taking on big tech. That's how he's going to position it. So he's already won in that regard.
I think that's exactly right. I think right, there's the legal dimension to this, and then there is the political one. Even if he doesn't win legally, and as I said, the odds have to be against him, because, as I said, it's very difficult to get past that initial obstacle. But even if he doesn't, he's set down a marker. He's said what he stands for and what he opposes, and he's also identified his opponents. So you can see how he's going to run with this, and it's going to be a powerful message.
Yeah. All right, let's go to some of the super chats, and we'll go to some of the questions in the live stream as well. Satoshi Nakamoto is a new member to the Duran community. Satoshi, sent us some Bitcoin. Come on, you've got a few million. shoot over some Bitcoin. From John Iwanik, super chat. A Polish intelligence officer fell from the window of HQ to his death shortly after Protasevich's arrest. We think it's connected. What do you think?
I don't know. All I could say is coincidences can happen, but this is a very interesting coincidence. I don't know, because, of course, obviously we don't have access to what is going on within the various intelligence communities. But the Poles have been exceptionally active in the events in Belarus. They've hosted a lot of the opposition to Lukashenko. They've been hosting a lot of the TV channels, I believe, including Nectar, the channel that was, Protasevich was involved in, and which was broadcasting into Belarus. So, it may be that this event is connected in some way. All I would say about that, the one word of caution is that I do wonder what exactly this person, if he did, die as a result of this, what exactly would make a connection between Protasevich and this individual so alarming that would cause this person's death, given that this person is in Poland, where he's presumably protected. But, who knows? It is a remarkable coincidence. It may just be a coincidence, but, it's certainly something to follow and to keep an eye on.
Yeah. From Nikolaus, SEK50, Nicholas, does Mitsotakis have a plan to fix Greek issues? Greece needs a proper way to get the economy up and running, not only rely on the tourists alone. Well, the tourists are not tourist season, I'm telling you, is not what it's going to what it used to be and what's going to be the future is not. Don't depend on it.
It's not. It's not. In fact, I just read. I mean, if we're talking about tourism, I mean, I understand that to the extent that British and Russian tourists are heading to that part of the world, they're mainly going to Cyprus, not Greece at the moment. Certainly, the Russians. I saw this on TASS, believe it or not, the TASS news agency said that Cyprus this year will be Russians' favored tourist destination above Turkey. So that's interesting. I just mentioned that. I mean, perhaps Alex wasn't aware of this, but I did see that yesterday. So that was something. But Mitsotakis, let's come back to him. He did have a plan, in my opinion. His plan was to get as close to the European Union as possible and as close to the United States as possible, in the hope that if he did everything that they told him, they would cut him and Greece some slack. Well, the Americans perhaps might be prepared in theory to do that. Angela Merkel never cuts anybody slack, and it was a completely misguided policy, in my opinion, and it's ended up with Greece in exactly the same position that it always was. So I don't think Mitsotakis any longer has a plan. I think he did have a plan once, but it clearly hasn't worked. It still seems to me that he is just about an improvement on the previous government of Alexis Tsipras, because I mean it's a better organized government, and it doesn't make quite such eccentric decisions as Tsipras's government did. But nonetheless, and notwithstanding, I don't really see any plan at the moment at all. It's still very tied to the European Union, to Brussels, to Berlin. Still does what it's told. Hopes that one day that will turn out right. And of course, it never does.
Yeah, there is no plan. When you don't control your own money, when you don't control fiscal policy, you have zero plan. Greece was 320 billion in debt in 2009. It is now, 350 billion in debt in 2021. There is no plan. The only plan is for the elite to get richer and richer. That is the plan. That's the plan.
That is exactly
there you
right.
go.
That's exactly. And without wanting to point any fingers, it's important to say that Mr. Mitsotakis is elite in Greece. I mean, he is the great feudal power in Eastern Crete. I mean, very wealthy family, very powerful, politically powerful, well-connected family. I mean, I'm not saying that he's doing this for him to enrich himself, but he does belong to that class of people who are doing very well out of this.
Yeah, they all do. Even someone like Tsipras, who theoretically didn't, they flew him to the U.S. and they made him a part of the team.
Indeed.
So, I mean, even if you're not part of the club, they're going to make sure you're going to get inside of the club, whether you like it or not.
Indeed so. And I mean, I don't know to what extent this is true, but I've heard that Mr. Tsipras actually was to some extent part of the club, in the sense that though he wasn't himself from that background, I'm told that he was backed. I don't know if this is true, but I was told by people who I think is reliable that he was backed by a lot of ship owning money. And if you know about Greek ship owners, they are very, very much people who would want to keep Greece exactly where it is at the moment. Not all of them, but some of them anyway.
Yeah. Anyway, thank you for that super chat, Nicholas. Yes, we wish there was a plan, but there is zero plan. At least for us, the normal people. There's a plan for the elite and the globalists, but for us, let's see. Julian, $5 super chat. This super chat is purely to thank you both for your outstanding work on Assange and much, much more, from Sydney, Australia. Thank you very much, Julian. As we said, we'll have a lot more news on Assange next week, so stay tuned. From Giselle Luke, $20 super chat. Top of the morning, gents, from Florida, USA. The last state of freedom and liberty in this broken union.
Well, indeed, and Governor DeSantis seems to be a powerful force, and perhaps the only person at the moment who is giving Trump a real run, it seems to me. But we'll see whether they work together or against each other. But certainly, Florida is an exceptional state in many senses, and in terms of its leadership too.
Yeah, they'll work together. They will work together.
I think so.
They're very well aligned.
I think so too.
All right. From Adam McLean, if Hungary leaves the EU, would they align with Russia?
Yeah, I think they would. But I mean, I think that let's not assume that's going to happen anytime soon. I mean, Orban is coming under enormous pressure at the moment. I mean, he's been attacked by Rutte, the Prime Minister of the Netherlands, in the most vitriolic terms. I mean, it's just astonishing. And of course, Rutte is agitating to throw Hungary out of the EU. But he does have allies within the EU. And I would have thought that there would be many countries which might not be sympathetic necessarily to Orban and to Hungary, which would still object to an attempt to throw a country out of the EU. So let's not assume it is going to happen. But if it does happen, if they do throw Hungary out of the EU, well, what choice would it have? I mean, realistically, at that point, I mean, it would have to look for friends. The EU would be hostile, and the friends it would look to is the China-Russia, power bloc. But all I would say is that may be a reason why it's not going to happen, because I can see people in Washington looking at this and saying to themselves, well, let's keep Hungary within the EU until we've managed to find some way of changing the regime there. because we don't really want it to align with China and Russia and be in a situation where Orban, if he faces regime change pressures, could turn to Moscow and Beijing for help. I mean, bear that in mind also.
Yeah, I agree with that assessment. From Amrit, Italian intel police have an effective cooperation as no attacks in the last 30 years on Italian soil compared to other major European nations, in spite of Italy being in a more dangerous position.
Well, one hears stories about this. Now, I should say that this is the kind of in-depth knowledge of what goes on in Italy, which is a bit beyond me. But we are in fact now in contact with an important Italian media group, and we're going to be exchanging information with them, and even sometimes perhaps doing joint programs with them, and that is going to provide us at the Duran with insight into these sort of matters. Italy is the country, and I don't want to sound like I'm, falling back on stereotypes, but Italy is a country where political intrigue and intrigue of this kind, intelligence level, is taken to the level of a high art. And if the Italian intelligence and secret agencies have managed to find ways of neutralizing threats to Italy, well, that would not surprise me. If that has come at the price of contacts which provide opportunities for certain people to launch strikes on other countries, then that is a very bad thing, and that will be Italy looking after itself at the expense of others. And I hope that that is not the case. And I would add that one country that tried to do exactly what Italy is being said here to have done, which was Britain. Britain in the 1980s became very much a place that supported various jihadi groups in places like Afghanistan. And it turned out horribly for us here. We had a whole spate of terrorist attacks, including one in the middle of the 2017 election. So, bear in mind, it's a dangerous game to play also.
All right. Ove wants to know in the stream, what is your thoughts about the disgraceful Swedish parliament that reinstituted the deep state man Löfven as prime minister? Again, the votes were against it, but 60 abstained. The Swedes are crying.
Well, of course they are. And I mean, I have to say, I am not at all surprised. I mean, we did a program about Sweden a short while ago. And Alex made the point, which he always does, and it is always right, which is that you must never underestimate the extraordinary ability of the EU combinat to keep the show on the road, to kick the can further down the road in order to keep things as they are. So they don't want elections at the moment because they're worried that the Democrats, who are a right-wing party, nationalist, sovereigntist, critical of the EU, apparently some of its members want better relations with Russia too. They're worried that the Democrats would do well. They don't want that to happen. So they keep an exhausted and discredited government in power beyond its natural life until they can find some great new leader who will replace it. And of course, that same leader, the Swedish Macron, will be then replaced by the next Swedish Macron when his or her time is up. But that's the game they play. So it is appalling. It is the opposite of democracy. It denies the Swedish people an opportunity to have a say. It keeps a government that is discredited and exhausted and deeply factionalized in power. It means that Sweden actually doesn't have a government at the moment. It has an administration. Administration has replaced government. It is a further case of immobilism, like we see with Merkel in Germany. But it is exactly what you get when you make your country part of the EU system.
Yep. Yes, Lena, the EU rock band, the traveling rock band, Alexander. It just does concert after concert, tour after tour, the never-ending tour.
No, it's the never-ending tour.
Yeah, incredible. Oh, well, it was expected.
That's exactly. I mean, it didn't surprise me at all. I mean, when we did our program, we predicted it. We said that it was one of many possible options. And one should never underestimate the tenacity and guile of these people. They may not know how to run an economy, but they do know how to remain in power. That is the one thing they are extremely good at. Yeah,
they don't know anything else, but they know how to stay in power.
Yeah,
that's the one thing they know how to do, and they know how to do it really well.
Yeah,
and they don't let anyone or anything stand in their way either.
Absolutely.
All right, from Julian, Ramoners are already demanding a replay if England wins Italy in the Euro, demanding the best out of 3.
That is a brilliant comment. By the way, Johnson, I was told this morning, I haven't seen this myself, I haven't been able to corroborate it, but he says if we do win, if England does win, then he's going to call a bank holiday. That's a holiday, a public holiday here. Well, we will see. I mean, England has not done especially well in international competitions in football for a very long time. And England, football is a game that was invented here and which all British people follow intensely. So, if England does win, it will certainly be a big event and many people will be very happy.
It's going to be a tough match.
It's going to be a very tough
good match. It'll be a good match.
I hope so. I hope so. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. From GEC says info from an anti-child trafficking charity said an estimated 27,000 children have disappeared. Believed trafficking since Haiti earthquakes. If true, there had to be a Haiti government corruption involved.
Absolutely. I mean, I look. I'm not able to verify a specific story like that, but anybody who knows anything about the nature of Haiti will know that the government there is I mean, it's not just corrupt. I mean, it's corruption is its organizing principle, not just corruption, but organized violence. It is a terrible political system, and one which the Haitian people, by the way, do not deserve. It is maintained on them through all kinds of both internal and external mechanisms. And again, I have to be careful what I say, but if you want to discuss the external mechanisms, look at Washington. And as I said, the roads lead to Hillary and Bill.
All right. Alan Watson says England will win. Sunday night, right? Yeah.
Absolutely, yeah.
Sunday evening, yeah.
By the way, can I just say, I mean, we hear lots about, English fans and all the rest. I mean, there's been people that are very happy here and everybody's behaving wonderfully well. I mean, it's a very good atmosphere to the extent that it can be in what is still not exact. I mean, we're now gradually coming out of lockdown, so people can move about, but it's a very, very good atmosphere here in London about this football. Just to say,
that's what I wanted to ask you in the rapid fire news segment. The other story that I forgot was Tokyo. No fans at the Olympics. No
Well,
fans.
It's
What are they
just,
doing?
what are they do? What indeed are they doing? I mean, these Olympics should have been called off. If they're going to hold them like this, they shouldn't hold them. That's my own personal view. But then it's
No fans.
no fans. I mean,
what's the reason to do this?
well, I mean, it's the same reason that they're giving about, that we've just discussed in Australia. But I mean, it's a dismal thing.
Yeah, it's depressing to even think about watching Olympics without anybody in the
I know.
stands. I mean, just don't do it then.
And very, very cruel for the athletes who, to some extent, depend on the fans to give them the support and the enthusiasm that drives them forward. By the way, when I was younger than I am now, we always used to talk about the Olympics that happened in Tokyo in '64. And for years and years and years, I was hearing people say that they were the best Olympics that they could, after the Second World War. So it's very, very sad to see that the repeat performance in Tokyo this time is such a complete washout.
Yeah. Flying Boar has a super chat, says, sorry, Italy is going to win on Sunday.
Well, who knows?
It's going to be a tough match. I think the two best teams got through. That's my opinion.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I agree with that.
At the end of the day, I think the two teams that performed the best did get through. So you're going to see the two best.
Absolutely. I agree. I agree with that.
Yes, let's see. Let's go back to the super chats here. From E. Smith, what do you think about the situation in Xinjiang and the Uyghurs?
Well, I don't know what is going on because this has become grotesquely politicized now and is being very much used as an information campaign. But can I just say something? I had a chat recently, but with a academic, a very well-known academic who covers China, British. I'm not going to name him because I don't want to cause him problems with various governments. But he told me that he has been trying to publicize problems in Xinjiang for many, many, many years. And he was finding that he wasn't getting anywhere in doing so. When he talked to people in the West, no Western media outlet wanted to touch the subject. Western governments were completely hostile. And he is now, instead of being pleased that it is being publicized, he is now alarmed at the way in which it is being publicized because he thinks that this is being done in a way that is intended to score points. So that suggests to me, and this is somebody whom I greatly respect, by the way, that there are indeed bad and tough and ugly things going on in Xinjiang province. And I've been to China and I saw how the Chinese government undoubtedly does control information, the extent to which it pursues a policy of pervasive control. So I have no difficulty believing that. But this person said that he also feels that this story is also being used now in order to promote a particular political agenda. And he says that he was pursuing this issue for many years and that he doesn't like the way it's been labeled a genocide, which he thinks is inappropriate. Now, those are his views. He's somebody who's been there. I have not, and I respect his views. As I said, he's somebody who is well known as a China specialist. He writes in newspapers. He appears on television, certainly in Britain and in other countries. And he's somebody whose views I absolutely respect. So that's all I can say.
All right, let's go to another super chat from Adam. Spoke with the UK vet who dealt with IRA loyalist militias. He says the IRA won't fight over customs checks that it fabricated by EU to keep UK in a single market.
I completely agree with all of this. This thing isn't really about Ireland at all. Never has been. It's all about the European Union trying to find some mechanism to keep Britain in the European single market by trying to say, well, look, if you leave the single market, that's going to create war in Ireland when there was never any possibility. This idea it wasn't the Irish who came up with this. It certainly wasn't the Northern Irish who came with this. It wasn't the British. It was Brussels. They came along and said to Theresa May, we've got to have a soft, transparent border within Ireland. And she lamely or willingly agreed and made it part of a condition for a agreement between Britain and the EU, knowing perfectly well, in my opinion, that the only way to do that while maintaining the economic integrity of Britain, of Great Britain, was to keep Britain in some form within the European single market. So it was always a device. I think that's entirely right. I don't think peace in Ireland was ever really threatened, certainly not up to now. And what has happened, in fact, is that by imposing this protocol, by creating a border along the Irish Sea, it is the EU, in my opinion, which is creating tensions within Northern Ireland, because, of course, people who are from the other community, the loyalist community, are unhappy and they're protesting about this. But can I also say something? And this is a point I also want to add and reiterate. It's never the British intention to create a hard border in Ireland. They always wanted free trade in goods between themselves and Ireland and between themselves and the EU. It was the EU that said, if you leave the EU without an agreement, a trade agreement, there has to be a hard border because that's necessary for us to protect the European single market. And what I find ironic about that, and by the way, I don't take that entirely seriously anyway, but what I find ironic about that anyway is that when, of course, it came to Ukraine back in 2013, they argued the opposite. They said it's perfectly fine for Ukraine to be both in a free trade relationship with Russia and part of the EU single market at one and the same time. They thought they could then use Ukraine to funnel goods into Russia, and they were furious when the Russians said this is not possible. But now that they find themselves in the opposite situation for political reasons, they're arguing the opposite when it comes to Ireland. So, I mean, you're absolutely right. I don't think there was ever any threat of war or conflict in Northern Ireland. It's just that the EU has used this issue in order to create trouble there and to create trouble for the British and to keep the British within the European single market. And that policy has not apparently been jettisoned.
Yeah. From Zhong Lang says, what about the terrorist attacks in the Xinjiang province?
Yeah, I mean, there have been. And can I just say, this person that I was talking about absolutely conceded that they do exist and that the terrorist groups, the jihadi terrorist groups, are indeed present there or have tried to gain a presence there, and that there was a deteriorating situation in Xinjiang province. I mean, he didn't dispute that the Chinese authorities had a real problem and that they were responding to that problem that they had to respond to that problem in some way. He's not disputing that at all. He just does say that he does think that the way they did it was, not appropriate and went too far. Well, that's perhaps an understatement of his words, but that's what he said. So, clearly this is not a straightforward issue, and that was why this academic, as I said, I can't name him, that is why this academic feels that this topic has been grotesquely politicized and is being used by certain people in the West in order to put China on the back foot in an information war. That's what he said. Now, I've not been there, so, I had a long discussion with this person, who, by the way, is a personal friend of my wife, and I know him, and I place credence in what he says.
All right. From Peter, says, Alex watched your vlog on Tucker Carlson. What is Alexander's reactions or view on this? Tucker Carlson, the NSA, the fact, Alexander, that the NSA has all but admitted. They've admitted that they were spying on him because he wanted to have an interview with, he was trying to arrange an interview with Putin.
As NBC.
Glenn Greenwald chimed in on this as well. And obviously, well, the NSA spying on Tucker Carlson. There you go.
As NBC has just had an interview with Putin, and as Fox also had an interview with Putin.
Megyn Kelly has done an interview with Putin.
Exactly.
Actually, I think she even went to Russia.
Exactly.
Who's the other guy at CNN that actually did the Valdai conference, I believe, or St. Petersburg?
Exactly.
I forgot his name. He was actually at the forum.
Exactly.
So
exactly. It's just ridiculous. Well, it is completely illegal what the NSA is doing. That is one, and secondly, the way in which he has been outed so reminds me of what they did with General Flynn. They leak to the media, to hostile media outlets, the fact that Tucker Carlson is under observation in a way that is clearly intended to cause him political damage, and it's outrageous. This thing is unbelievable. So whoever was leaking that information has committed a serious offense, serious criminal offense, and the NSA was acting illegally anyway. But it is a whole. This is a massive story. It is an outrageous story. This is the single most popular journalist in America, and he is being spied on by the US government. The US, I used to know, if a thing like this had happened, say in the 60s, at the height of the Vietnam War, or sometime like that, there would have been outrage. The media would have been united in condemning it. And apart from a couple of conservatives, there is nothing. It's astonishing it's astonishing to me to see the drift to authoritarianism on the part of the left in what calls itself the left in the United States. It horrifies me, and the whole attitude of the media colluding with the spying on the single most successful journalist in America.
Yeah, Zariel makes the point that it's not really the surveillance that is the crime; it's the unmasking.
Absolutely,
according to the NSA, that's the unmasking of an American citizen, to be even more specific. But still, it's extremely troubling that the NSA is using this surveillance excuse to kind of cast a very wide net, that it's surveilling foreign chatter online, and it's surveilling the foreign communication, and it's scooping up American citizens, and then it's unmasking them now. Yeah. So we've gone from Trump to Flynn to Tucker. They've got Assange. Who do you think they're going to go after next? Well, they're going to come after everybody.
Everybody, exactly.
Everybody. They're going to come after everybody.
Everybody. Including some of the people who are cheerleading it at the moment. If I can say so.
Exactly.
This affair horrifies me. It really does. Now, Tucker is a strong, tough character. He's fighting back. He's not been charged. There's no suggestion that he's committed any crime here. But he's got to be very careful now, because, not careful. He's got to be wise to the fact that there's clearly people in the United States who are out to get him, because that's what this is also all about.
Thank you, fellow citizen. They also got Matt Gaetz as well. They one of the points that Glenn Greenwald made was, and I thought it was really interesting. He said the DC establishment, the politicians in DC, are scared to death of the surveillance state. He said that. Absolutely. He said they are scared to death. That is, when you hear that, that's where you understand that the United States is heading down a very, very dangerous, scary road. If not, the world is heading down that road.
Absolutely. Can I just make one quick observation? The reason they're scared to death of the surveillance state is because the surveillance state clearly has all kinds of things on them. Otherwise they wouldn't presumably be scared of it. It explains an awful lot about the last 5 years. Because we've had all these investigations of Donald Trump, and as we've discussed many times, it's astonishing that they're not able to come up with anything. And if you operate this kind of system, then the person you are most afraid of is the person you can't have leverage over. And that explains, I think, why the intelligence community, the surveillance state, call it whatever you like, is so suspicious of Trump, and why at the same time they're so angry with him, because they have no leverage over him. And that, to my mind, explains an awful lot.
Yeah, I agree. From Flying Boar, will Russia and China balance Afghanistan?
Well, this is a very big question. I mean, again, as I said, there's been a major diplomatic push over the last few weeks, last few days, rather, not weeks. And Russia is very much the center of this, because as far as I can see, there's a kind of division of labor. The Chinese put up the money, the Russians put up the diplomats and the troops. That's the way it seems to work with those two. But can I just say, ultimately, the decision has to be made by the Taliban themselves. I mean, they will take control of Afghanistan. I think that's a given. Now, they have a choice. Either they work with the regional powers in order to stabilize the situation in Afghanistan, in which case they can run Afghanistan as they please, as a kind of theocratic state, but they can do so with the tacit acceptance of the neighboring powers, or they can do what happened back in the 1990s, and they can make Afghanistan a launch pad for jihadist groups, trying to get into Central Asia, Iran, Pakistan, perhaps China, Xinjiang and all that. If they do the second, then the instability we're going to see in Central Asia is going to be enormous, and they will find that all the regional powers are going to combine against them. If they do the first, well, they can run their theocratic state within Afghanistan itself, but I suspect the regional powers will come with a modus vivendi with them and leave them alone, and might even be prepared to do economic deals with them. So it's ultimately not the choice of the Russians and the Chinese. It's the Taliban's choice. And what they decide to do now, we will just have to wait and see.
All right. Alexander from Flying Boar, update on the Black Sea. What's going on there?
Yeah, I mean, there's this big exercise which is going on, which has provided the Russians with the perfect opportunity to sound off, as they're doing. And, they're talking all the time about, American amphibious warfare carriers operating in the Black Sea. This has happened many times, by the way. This isn't new, but it's a good opportunity now for the Russians to give all kinds of warnings and to say, if you step beyond certain lines, we will take action against you. And they say quite openly, I mean, to a degree that I find astonishing, that if Western warships, including British warships, cross into Russian waters, they are now liable to be attacked. And they're saying that without any hesitation. And Lavrov, the foreign minister, actually made a speech in which he actually said, this is not just our policy, but it contrasts with the position of some liberal figures in Russia, in the so-called non-system opposition, Navalny and co, which would not protect Russia's sovereignty in this way. So they're making it a domestic political thing. So that's, it seems to me, what's happening. And the Russians jumped on Dominic Raab, who is increasingly known, by the way, to have opposed sending the British warship so close to the Crimean coast. But he's been put up to say, well, the British will do it again. And the Russians have jumped on Dominic Raab and say, if they do it again, well, they're liable to be attacked if they do it. So it's given the Russians an opportunity both to talk up the importance of this exercise and to set out in the loudest and noisiest way that they can what their red lines are in the Black Sea. And be absolutely clear, the Russians dominate the Black Sea militarily. They surrounded it with air bases. They can bring fighter bombers and bombers to attack. They have very advanced anti-ship missiles. I mean, any US or Western Navy that's tried to operate there would rapidly be overwhelmed. And of course, the US can't deploy aircraft carriers to the Black Sea because it is prevented from doing so by the Montreux Convention. So it's given the Russians what an opportunity to grandstand on this issue. That's my own view about it.
All right, from Mark Hewitt, the standard of British MPs is rising. Do you agree with Claudia Webb that the UK government should sue Belarus?
Well, indeed. I mean, they're rising downwards, is all I can say. Well, I mean, I suppose I have to answer the question. Of course, the answer is no. What is Britain? Why would Britain want to be involved in Belarus? I mean, straightforward question. What is Britain doing in Belarus? Why do we want to interfere or meddle in that story? And why not just leave Belarusians to sort it out themselves, which they can do, by the way? I mean, the thing people like this don't seem to grasp is that the British and Western powers interfering in Belarusian affairs, trying to sort of shape them in a certain direction, actually does the opposite. It means that Lukashenko's position in Belarus becomes consolidated because large numbers of people in Belarus see what happened in Ukraine and elsewhere and say, my goodness, we certainly don't want the Western powers coming here. We don't want to see what happened in Ukraine happening to Belarus. So his position in Belarus becomes consolidated and he gets more Russian and Chinese backing as a result. So it achieves the opposite of what they say they want, unless, of course, that is what they want. I mean, I don't know. I mean, do they want to drive Belarus into the arms of the Chinese and the Russians? Because that's how it's shaping up now. I did, again, a short program on my channel, in which I pointed out that there's now a whole web of agreements being agreed between the Russians and the Belarusians, which will fully integrate Belarus's industrial and agricultural economy into Russia's. They're going to have a unified tax system. Before long, they will have a single currency. I mean, is that really what?
For what? For what?
For what?
For a kid that was the photographer of a real neo-Nazi group in Ukraine, a real one, not these fake ones in the United States that they go off about. No, a real one. Absolutely. This is all about that guy. And I'm not saying, hopefully that guy finds his way to a better position and it gets sorted out for him. He's a young guy and, hopefully they sort it out. But I mean, all of this for that, that's the reason.
Well, exactly. I mean, it's just nuts. I mean, it's crackers. And of course, I mean, I come back to, this, the policy is completely misguided. And it's pushed Belarus and Lukashenko and the Belarusian government to a position which they never wanted to be. They were trying to maintain some degree of equidistance between Russia and the West. And now they've closed the border with Ukraine. They're integrating their economy with Russia. It's just the opposite. I mean,
do an investigation. Belarus said, let's do an investigation. You have the email communications of this supposed terrorist threat, this bomb threat. You have the email communications. You can get all the chatter on social media, Telegram, Twitter, everything that was said. You have it all. Just do an investigation. Belarus said, yes, let's do an investigation and see the reasons why this Ryanair plane had to come to land in Minsk. And the EU said, no investigation. We don't want one.
No, I know. The ICAO says it is conducting one, which they didn't want, but is apparently happening. But of course, we're not going to hear anything about this investigation because they clearly don't want a proper investigation, because if they did, they would. I mean, the right way to do it is hold an investigation first, then decide. Exactly. Now we do it the other way around.
Exactly. Hold the investigation and then come to the conclusions.
Yeah. There's a passage in Alice where, as I said, the Red Queen, the Queen of Hearts, actually says, first the sentence, then the trial. That's where we are.
Yeah. Damien Sullivan said it best. All this for a Ryanair flight. Exactly. All of this for a Ryanair flight, of which Ryanair didn't want to stop traveling to Belarus. They even resisted, and they said maybe the EU is going a little too far here. Even Ryanair resisted.
Yeah, exactly. And how does this help liberal people, liberal-minded people in Belarus, they have to now travel to Moscow in order to go to the West. How does that help them? I mean, how does cutting off contacts help them? I mean, what I do expect, though, and I would say this, is that clearly there's such a head of steam now building up that there's going to be a major renewed effort, it seems to me, over the next couple of months to destabilize the government there. And Lukashenko is warning about it. And the Russians are also warning about it. And the very powerful an influential chief of the Russian Security Council, a man called Patrushev, is also warning about it too. So I think this is now a certainty, but the Belarusians and the Russians are prepared.
Yeah. Where's the EU going to go? No one wants to deal with the EU anymore. We did a program on this about Merkel's announcement that she's going to bring in all the Balkan nations. She's going to subjugate the Balkans to this EU ideology now. That's her new mission. The reason why is because no one wants to freaking deal with the European Union anymore. Belarus, gone. Turkey makes fun of the European Union. They put Ursula von der Leyen to sit on a damn sofa. That's how much fun they're making of the European Union. Yeah. The United States, well, under Sleepy Joe, is completely lost. They have no clue what's going on. Russia, they checked out a long time ago. No one wants to deal with the European Union anymore, and they're doing it to themselves. So now the European Union is going to look to subjugate all in the Balkans because no one else wants to deal with these guys.
I know. I mean, to lose Britain and win out Northern Macedonia, I mean, it's a fair exchange, I suppose.
Yeah, I mean, the UK checked out.
I know. It's. I mean, I don't want to sort of sound. I mean, having been to Skopje many times, I don't want to suggest that I don't think well of that country. But I mean, still, I mean, it's absolutely a fact. If you look at all the countries which surround the EU, Britain, Norway, Switzerland, Turkey, Russia, Belarus, they all have problems with it. They're all now on bad terms with it. I mean, and that is remarkable. That's an extraordinary thing. What the EU is doing is it's creating a ring of hostility and instability around itself. And if it extends into the Western Balkans, by the way, it will bring that instability and hostility into itself. Because make no mistake, the Western Balkans, the EU doesn't really understand at all. And they remain bitterly unstable, largely because of what the EU has previously done to them.
Yeah. All right. Let's get back to some of the questions here in the super chats. From Sanjeva, $10. Love your video, guys, and watch you daily. I'm in Australia with the largest Greek diaspora. Can you briefly speak about the Greek and American diaspora around the world in a video?
Well, indeed, because that's a huge subject. But you're absolutely right. I mean, both America and Australia, certainly Australia, have a huge diaspora, Greek diaspora, and very, very important also, by the way, in the life of Greece itself. I mean, Australian Greeks have played a big role in Greek affairs. And, there's Hellenism, Greekness, if you like, is both Greece and Cyprus, these two states, but it is the diaspora too. And one should not overlook that or forget it. And it's something which I think other countries which don't have vast diasporas, perhaps have difficulty understanding that what goes on among the Greek community in the US or in Australia actually does have resonance right across the Greek world.
Yeah. All right. From Raphael. Let me pull it up here. Salute, guys. Last week I said someone told the US to leave Afghanistan. Now, you guys still think I'm a cuckoo for saying it. Thank you and good job.
Rafa, we never think you're a cuckoo. quite the contrary. As your comment shows, you are a most perceptive man.
Thank you very much, Raphael. And yes, the U.S. is they left the air base in the middle of the night without any warning. We've got a video on that, by the way.
I know, absolutely. I have to say, I mean, that was shameful. I mean, to do it in that way. I mean, it was, as I said, it really was like, a thief in the night. running away. I mean, it's awful that it happened like that.
Yeah. Teodoro sent us a super sticker. Thanks for being you in 1999. Thank you very much, Teodoro, for that. And A. Sanchez, a 4.99 super sticker as well. It's like a walking like robot thing. Thank you very much for that as well. Toilet Sauce, €10 super chat. Did you see the embarrassing display in Lithuania where a NATO press conference was interrupted due to Russian planes and international airspace seemed set up?
Well, of course it was. I mean, again, it's this attempt to try and create the narrative of some great Russian threat. So we conduct vast exercises in the Black Sea, and that's fine. That's absolutely peacemaking. And the Russians sent an aircraft over the Baltic, which of course is a sea where the biggest city, remember, is St. Petersburg. Russia is a Baltic power. And of course, this is somehow enormously threatening, and we must interrupt news conferences because of it. It's ludicrous. It was the most absurd show. And I mean, it tells you the nature of this organization now.
Yeah. Sanjeva, who asked about the Greek diaspora, Armenian and not American. I read it as American. Sorry about that, Sanjeva. An Armenian in Australia with a large Greek diaspora.
Absolutely true. And can I just say, I mean, I spoke about Greece having an enormous diaspora. So, of course, does Armenia. Then they function in very similar ways. There are obviously very great differences, but Greeks and Armenians have many, many things in common with each other, and it's one of the reasons why we feel such kinship for them.
From Flying Boar, an update on Idlib in Syria.
Yeah, well, the latest story is a very, very interesting one, actually, which is that the Americans have been trying to keep open what they call a humanitarian corridor passing from Turkey into Idlib, which they say is necessary in order to provide humanitarian aid to the people of Idlib. And this is a humanitarian corridor which was authorized many years ago as a result of the UN Security Council resolution, which is about to expire. And the Russians are saying that they will under no circumstances agree to this humanitarian corridor remaining open, because as far as they're concerned, the humanitarian aid that passes through this corridor goes directly into the hands of Hebrzir Tahrir, or whatever it's called, the latest incarnation of Jabhat al-Nusra, which the Russians consider to be a terrorist organization linked to Al-Qaeda, and which was indeed at one time connected to Al-Qaeda and quite probably still is. So the Russians have said they will close this corridor. We will see whether that has any meaning, whether in fact aid will just continue to cross the border, probably will. But as I understand it, the reality is that Idlib is now essentially a group of camps strung out across the Turkish border, which are controlled by jihadi groups. Idlib city, which continues to be controlled by jihadi groups which spend a great deal of time fighting each other. And more of the region is quietly passing under Syrian government control. So, step by step, it's incremental and slow at the moment, but that is the actual reality. And the other thing I'd say about Idlib is that there's obviously an economic crisis in Syria, but it has been most savage of all in Idlib, because Idlib still is connected to the Syrian economy. And the sanctions that were imposed on Syria are especially savage in Idlib province, partly because Idlib province is not getting the economic aid from Russia and Iran, which is now becoming Syria's economic lifeline. So that is the paradox of the sanctions. They're actually hurting, especially hard, the people the US says it's supporting.
Yeah. All right. From Zariel, any news on both Free Assange and G. Maxwell cases? Thanks for your continuing work, gentlemen. Very much appreciated. for the Assange. As we did in our intro, we'll have a lot of news next week,
Absolutely.
Zariel, a lot of news because Alexander is going to be working closely with that team. So next week, we're going to do a lot of videos, good videos on what's going on with Assange, and Alexander will fill us in the inside track there. And Maxwell.
Well, there was a very, very interesting documentary about her in Britain, actually. This is beginning to become a much more high-profile story in Britain itself. And I have to say, she didn't come across well in it at all, and that's putting it mildly. It was very much a program that basically showed her as a rather damaged and cold and rather calculating person, and basically implied that the stories that we've been hearing are true. I don't think that will surprise many people, but that was certainly the takeaway I came away from watching that documentary. She's been making every conceivable attempt to try and put off this trial, to delay it as far as she can. She's made multiple applications for bail. However, the evidence is now coming together fast, and it looks as if we're going to get a trial this year. And if that happens, I predict that she will be convicted on this evidence, on the weight of this evidence. And in that case, she will probably stay in prison for the rest of her perhaps not very long life. So again, I will say what I have said before. And it was basically a point also made, interestingly, not so much in the documentary, but in the commentary that appeared in Britain around it, that for her own sake, and if you like, in order that she make her own reckoning with her own conscience, she has one, but I assume she does. She should come forward. She should come clean and tell us all there is to say, and disclose all that there is. It's better for her from every point of view. I realize that it would put her in great jeopardy, but realistically, she is in that anyway.
There's no way out for her. No way out for her. That's right. Where are we here? Let's see. From Anne, super sticker, $5 super sticker, alligators. Thank you very much for that, Anne. We really appreciate it. From Adam, rename the G7 to the EU Global Summit. 5 of 9 seats are in the EU.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, by the way, the Russians are now talking about UN Security Council reform, saying that the West is overrepresented on the UN Security Council. So it's absolutely true. And when the Russians do this, I mean, they're usually acting as feelers, as a cat's paw, if you like, for Beijing. So I suspect this has been hatched between Moscow and Beijing. And on this issue, they will get support even from countries like India, which India feels, I think rightly, that it should have a seat on the Security Council, that it's a powerful enough country, it's a nuclear power, a huge population, big economy. It should be represented as a permanent member on the Security Council. And I think that's obvious, and I think that's
obvious.
Absolutely.
It's obvious. The fact that India is not on the Security Council is,
It's astonishing. So that and the G7 too. I mean, it's now becoming, the G7 is just the West now. And the West is not the dominant economy that it once was. And again, it's strange how some people don't understand that. I think there's much more willingness to accept that in Washington, by the way, than there is in Europe. It's the Europeans who fight to keep the G7 because it makes them feel important. But of course, they're not.
Yeah. All right. From Toilet Sauce, headline translated from German. India shot, fraud discovered because nobody became sick or died. What a headline, eh? And there's a clown world emoji.
So, it is a headline. I mean, again, we have to be very careful what we say because certain people keep an eye on us. So it is, all I'm going to say is it is certainly a headline.
Yeah. Thank you for that super chat. From GEC, many policies and media-inspired actions have seemed designed to divide the world into groups that can then be played against each other by shadow players. Your opinion?
Absolutely. I think that's entirely true. I mean, divide and conquer. Wasn't that what the Romans did? Divide and rule. But I mean, that's exactly what we see. It happens all the time. The British part, I mean, it's not new. The Romans did it. The British did it. The Americans did it to a certain extent. And now, of course, the globalists do it. And of course, the objective always is you divide everybody, you break them up, and then you control them and bring them all together, but with yourself on top. That's always the plan.
Yeah. From A. Sanchez, 999. Excellent work as always, gents. What is the likelihood of another major country leaving the EU in the next decade?
I think it's high. I mean, I don't know how it's going to happen, but I think it's high. But I think there is also another possibility, which should never be discounted, which is that we could see the whole thing collapse internally. In other words, we could see a situation arise where, for example, Germany says we're not prepared to go on bankrolling others, and that leads to a unraveling of the whole euro system. I mean, that's just one potential scenario. Or we could see France say, you know, we're leaving the euro. I mean, or there could be a global economic recession which impacts on the EU exceptionally badly, and they find that they try to impose more austerity on top of the austerity there's already been, and people in Southern Europe finally say enough. So, I mean, you know, some kind of collapse, in my opinion, in some form, is inevitable. It's just that I don't know when it's going to come. Somebody said to me, I think it's Tom Longert said to me, that Austrians, and that's a school of economics, are always right about everything except the date. They always expect things to happen sooner than they do. And that's how I feel about the EU. I think that this collapse is inevitable. I always expect it sooner than it happens, but one day it will come. By the way, on Germany, I noticed that the CDU is now going into the election in September, reiterating that there is going to be no euro bonds, and saying that this deal that Merkel did last year, the setting up of this slush fund, the recovery fund, is going to be the last time that's ever going to happen. And that's what the CDU is saying as its election platform. Now, whether they really mean it is another matter, but it does give you a sense of how Germans feel.
From Amrit, Japan and Russia haven't been able to negotiate on disputed territories, but still Japan doesn't act like the Europeans sanctioning Russia in spite of US pressure.
Well, Japan has actually sanctioned Russia, though not to the same extent or the same degree. And they weren't happy about doing that at all. And the Japanese have been concerned, very concerned, that Western hostility to Russia has consolidated the Chinese-Russian alliance. And they're right. And one can see that this has been a major concern that they have. And by the way, the Indians have been saying the same thing. They've been trying to tell people in London, especially, and in Washington, you know, ease up on Russia. All you're doing is you're creating a situation where the Russians are forging ever closer links with China, and that is bad for us. But the people in Washington and London have paid no attention.
Yeah. From Marit, Italy developed many advanced technologies, maglev semiconductor equipment, but after joining the euro, they weren't able to capitalize on that. It has supported the German economy mainly. Italy, our industrial hub.
Absolutely. Italy is the second biggest industrial hub in the EU after Germany. And you are absolutely right. Italy has a marvelous history of industrial and technological innovation. It's produced amazing scientists. It's produced fabulous products. It has a tremendous design tradition. And all of that has been crushed under the EU system. But can I just say, not just Italy. Where in the EU is the EU now leading in any field of technology or industrial innovation? Is there a single big tech company in the EU? Is there a single one? I mean, contrast that with, say, Russia. Economy far smaller than the EU, but they have Yandex, they have Telegram, they have Kontaktia, they have all of these things. They are developing, nuclear power. They're building supercomputers. They're doing all kinds of things. What are we doing? Well, I say we're not longer in the EU, thankfully, in Britain. But what is the EU achieving? It is stagnating. It is stagnating technologically, industrially, in every sphere. And Germany, which was also an innovation and design powerhouse, is finding increasingly that it is being left behind. I was reading in the Financial Times recently that in large parts of the German civil service, they still rely on fax machines.
Yeah, well, maybe better. Maybe it's better to just go back to notebooks.
No, well, quite.
Given the surveillance that's going on.
Well, indeed.
All right. Sajeva says, kind request, more long-form vlogs about Russia internal situation, Syria economic prospects next decade, alternative news sites.
Well, indeed, why not? I mean, absolutely. And people can suggest things, and we will certainly take those into account, and we will do them. We do have to keep in touch with the news flow also, bear in mind. But, we're very happy to do in-depth looks at particular countries or particular topics. And we're going to be talking, as Alex said, to Robert Barnes, and we'll be doing that. And we've got other people lined up. Alex is working on invitations to all sorts of people, and we will be doing in-depth talks about many things.
All right. From Brian, a €10 super chat. Thank you very much, Brian, for that. From Big Bush Ape Tits, appreciate your work casting light on all the BS from the mainstream media. £10 super chat. Thank you very much for that as well. And from Adam McLean, the Swiss buy F-35s, not Rafael Gripen Typhoons. EU snub? ?
Absolutely. I think definitely, because I think that the EU has been relentlessly pushing Typhoons and especially Rafales, the French fighter jets. I mean, the French have been. I mean, I should make it very clear. I'm not an aerospace engineer or a military technologist. I know lots of people who come on this onto these into our programs know a lot more about these things than I do. But the French, especially, I know, have been promoting the Rafale as a kind of super fighter, saying that it's one of the best fighters in the world. And yet the Swiss, who might have been expected to go for a European product, have elected to go for an American one. And I think that is very telling. And it shows that they're not happy with the way they're being put under pressure by the EU at the moment.
Yeah. All right. Let me just do a quick check on the super chats. I think we got everything. Yes, we did. All right, Alexander. Those are all the questions.
Well, a fabulous program. I mean, can I just say, I mean, we were talking about news cycles. This is a very active and busy news cycle at the moment. Lots is going on around the world. I mean, we have obviously Afghanistan. And I think the business, I'm glad somebody brought up Tucker Carlson, because it's a difficult topic for us to cover because where we're hosted, though we're going to do more of this on our other platforms. But that's a huge subject. That's a huge, huge story. I mean, they're now going for journalists.
Yeah.
And not just any journalist. And that's a huge story. We have Assange. It's a big story too. We have all the big geopolitical things. And what's going on in Australia is not a small story either. So, I mean, it's actually a very, very big.
A lot is happening around the world.
A lot is happening around the world. So, we're very busy. and the more you contact us and people come and talk, the more we are engaged. And we welcome people from everywhere. I think there was a person from China and India too. Please, every part of the world. Yeah.
We have a question here. It's Russian, but my Russian is good. What do you think about the president in Haiti? I got that. We talked about Haiti. We did a video about Haiti.
We did.
And maybe we'll do a follow. I don't know if we'll do a follow up. Maybe we'll see how the news cycle is on that.
It's an evolving story, but to my mind, it's about Haiti and the great tragedy of that country, which is one of the most remarkable countries in the Caribbean. It's got extraordinary history and extraordinary culture, by the way, but it's also a story about corruption, and to be very clear, American corruption.
Yeah. Tigray, that's another news story. I saw that in the live stream.
Absolutely. Very, very
though, I mean, a lot of people in the comments said that we kind of need to do a little more research into seeing exactly the dynamics between the Tigray region and Ethiopia. Some people are saying that it wasn't as presented in many of the articles of the news reporting.
Yeah, I mean,
the way Ethiopia acted. I don't know. We have to look into it maybe a little more carefully. I'm not sure.
Well, of course we do, because I mean, again, I mean, we have to work with the information we are given, and this is a very difficult thing to work through because we don't have a very great amount of information from
certain regions.
Sources. Exactly. This is one of the great problems. I mean, if we're talking about Russia, China, the Middle East to some extent, there are many different sources of information that you can get about those countries because they have their own media, they have their own internets, they have their own sites. There are lots of sites, for example, that cover the Middle East. Some of them Western-based, British-based, Middle East Eye, I'll monitor. You can get different perspectives, but on Ethiopia, it's much more narrow and very difficult to get a full and complete picture of what's going on in a country like that. So the more we get, the more interesting it is, and the more interaction from people from there we get, the better it is too.
Yeah, absolutely. From Rit, a super chat says Russia's advanced semiconductor industry based in Zelenograd, Moscow. It is developing Elbrus processors and many other chips. Not what most think in the West.
Oh, I know, and I happen to know this because I was, again, this is something I was talking about. I mean, Russia does have a very, very developing semiconductor industry. One of the problems is that one of the major producers of as in the West, there are private companies like the Baikal Corporation, for example, that make semiconductors. But some of the most advanced semiconductors in Russia are made by the Rostec Corporation, which is a company very much like Samsung in Korea. It's a sort of vast octopus that does lots of different things. It also is an absolute key part of the Russian military industrial complex. And of course, it's quite secretive on some of its activities. But I've heard the same, that, some Russian microprocessors are actually very advanced indeed. Whether they come up to Taiwanese levels, I'm not in a position to say. I'm not a technologist, but the Russians are certainly able to produce now their own supercomputers using their own processors, and that is indicative.
Yeah. All right. And finally, a super chat from Kurt says, bring Crypto Rich on again. Absolutely.
Indeed, absolutely. We will.
Be
definitely.
Very happy to have Crypto back on. We always have great conversations with Crypto Rich. All right, guys, that is everything. Alexander, I believe you have a very busy day ahead.
A very, 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 very busy day, because obviously there's all the legal activity with Julian Assange's case. It'll all be sorted out within the next couple of days in terms of what's going to happen. We're then going to have a long period in the summer when we're all waiting and then we're going to have the hearing in November. One thing I particularly want to find out, by the way, is this. There's two appeals from the decision of the Westminster Magistrates Court. One is the appeal against the decision that was brought by the United States, but Assange's lawyers have also cross-appealed. They're disputing many of the findings that the judge made in that judgment. Even though she decided that he should not be extradited, they said that many of the things she decided for and it sided with the Americans about were wrong. And I don't know what's happened to that appeal, whether that's also going to be heard in November, or whether the High Court has decided that they're only going to focus on the American appeal. So that's one thing I'm hoping to find out today.
Yeah. All right, Engine Kid, what do you do? What do you two think about Brian Stelter and Oliver Darcy saying Tucker Carlson is the next Alex Jones and very dangerous to America?
Well, I mean,
They work for their surveillance states, so they're doing what they're told.
Absolutely, and I mean, I think that's a terrible thing to say. I mean, Alex Jones can speak for himself. I mean, I think a lot of things that I'm not somebody who's a natural fan of his, but I mean, he can speak for himself. But I mean, I also find making comparisons like that are offensive to both people, actually. But I mean, to talk about people being Tucker Carlson, an American patriot, which he is, being a danger to America, I think that's outrageous. I mean, I think that's the most disgraceful smear.
Tucker Carlson is Tucker Carlson. He has his own body of work and his own history. Alex Jones, Jones. He has his own body of work and his own history. Absolutely. And they both have done a lot of work over the decades.
Absolutely,
it shouldn't be discounted.
No, absolutely,
it should not be discounted.
Absolutely,
and they've done independent work, unlike Stelter's.
Quite, exactly so.
All right, we'll leave it there, guys. Thank you very much. GEC, Zariel, thank you very much for moderating. Really appreciate it. Thank you to all the questions in the live stream, to the super chats. Locals, check us out on Locals, ODYSEE, BitChute, Super U, and Rumble. Also, look for us on Getter. We have about 200 followers now on Getter.
Oh, wow.
That's that social platform from Jason Miller. Let's see how it goes. Let's see how it goes. And Duran Shop, guys, 10% off. Long sleeve shirts, T-shirts, and hats. I don't know, do you have a mug there as well?
I do.
Okay.
My wife has all the ones with the flags at the moment. She loves them, by the way.
All right.
And she's pinched all my hoodies.
There you go. Oh, the hoodies are great.
Yeah, the hoodies are great.
The hoodies are great. Let me say this: the hats. You have some hats. The hats
absolutely
are amazing.
Amazing, yeah.
I mean, I love the hats, and they're just nicely embroidered.
Absolutely,
really good stuff. Good quality. All right. Thank you guys for this live stream. And we will be back next week with a lot of really, really good videos, guys. So stay tuned. Take care, everybody.